This problem asks us to write a function called lm's_in_list, which takes in one parameter, a list of lists. We want to return a new list with the corresponding lengths of each sublist. For example, if you had a list containing the sublists 1 in hello and 2 world and CS, you would want to return a new list containing the integers 2 and 3, as those are the lengths of each sublist inside the big list that's passed in as a parameter. When writing any function, the first step is to define the function. So let's write out the function definition. It's called lm's_in_list. The name of the function is lm's_in_list, and let's pass in a parameter called biglist. There are many ways to go about doing this problem, so let's go over 2 of those ways. First, we want to create a new list. This new list is what we'll be adding the lengths of the sublist to. So let's call it numList, and we'll initialize it as an empty list. Let's write the for loop. For a list in big list. Now, a list is each sublist within the big list. Since we want to know how many elements are in each a list, we'll make a count variable here. It's important to note that we don't want the count variable outside this outer for loop because we want the count to reset for each sublist we look at. Now, let's iterate through the elements in a list and add 1 to the count for each element we look at. For lm in a list, we're going to add 1 to the count. Then, outside of this for loop, once we have the number of elements in a list, we want to append the count to numList. The reason that we're doing this outside of the inner for loop is because we want to append the final count of the elements in a list, not each time we reach a new element. Finally, we'll return numList after each a list has been iterated through. Now we'll run it, and as you can see, it gave us the output that we wanted based on test 1 and test 2 that were created below the function definition. There's another way to do this problem that requires less lines of code. We're going to start off doing the same thing that we did of defining the function and passing in the big list parameter. We're also going to create the numList variable and initialize it as an empty list. There's a function that allows us to get the length of any particular string, tuple, or list without having to use a counter. It's the length function that we've worked with many times before. We start off keeping the function definition the same, as well as the numList variable. However, when we start iterating, instead of creating a count, we're going to go ahead and append the length of a list to numList. Now, all we have to do is return numList outside of the for loop, and as you can see, if we comment out this function, we're going to get the same result.